Hello everyone, welcome to a video. I'm gonna just talk and draw and yeah, you can just watch and listen. This is gonna be a nice one. So, as I grew up, I've always thought that I've been in control of my life, control of who I am, the mood I'm in, the places I go, what happens to me, control of everything within my life. I've always been at peace and safety because of this judgment I've had. And then, I'd say it was nearly a year ago now, I was kicked out of my home, made homeless, and realized that I'm totally out of control of my life. And now, obviously, the situation I was in has its own reasons and judgments and everything into there, but it changed me, and it changed me a lot because it held me to such high responsibilities, and I had to lift myself up to them in a time where all I wanted to do was just bow down. And now, in my life now, I have control. And it's not to say just because I got out that situation, I gained the control that I once had in my life. No, I mean that I found that the control that I had in my life was no longer correct. And to get control again, it would mean something entirely different. I realized that you can't control emotions or situations or anything outside of your consciousness. The only thing you can control is you. The words you say, the thoughts, not even the thoughts you think or the emotions you feel, just the words you say and the actions that you do. And now I'm gonna just outright say, you can think you control your thoughts, but I've never experienced an ego death, by the way. But the term of an ego death is to basically realize that you are not your thoughts, you are your feelings. And now, I guess in a way, I have had an ego death, but that was again like a situational thing. I realized that I'm not my thoughts, I'm completely my feelings, and to use my old basis of control to cover my true emotions causes only bad things because they unleash back out. They pent up and cause disruption in your life in so many different ways. It's like the law of causality in Berserk. Just strikes you back. Anyway, so I realized that in my life, I can only control a very limited amount of things. So I ought to embrace those aspects I can control. And now, I explained, obviously, they're the words that you say and the actions you take. Those are the only two things completely in your control. So what does that mean? That means anyone that you speak to, the words that you say to them have an impact into that person's consciousness and their life. If your words are powerful enough or bear enough meaning to them, those words that you have said will dramatically alter the course of their life. Think about this, for example. If your mother was to say she never loved you, how would that make you feel? Deep internal pain, I presume. If your partner was to say, I want to break up with you, how would that feel? But if a homeless man was to walk up to you and explain his whole life story and then beg you for money, you may shrug him off like if it was nothing. But the fact that you've just met another conscious being who's just explained his whole life story to you and you've shrugged him off should mean something. It should absolutely mean a lot. Do you get what I'm saying? So the words that you said, or more so the words that other people have said, can affect you. So the words that you say can affect others. That's what I'm getting at here. So realize that everything you say has power. And there's obviously a scale towards the power that we have in our words. So you ought to be careful, is basically the message in that. You ought to be careful in what you say. But not to the point of hesitation, because if you hesitate with your words, then they lose all power. So what I mean is that you should always know what the worst thing to say will be. Obviously, telling someone to fuck off or calling someone an outright bastard is gonna be very unhelpful to any situation. But then even telling someone that they're loved can be very strange and warrant a lot of suspicion. People don't like the existential is one huge thing. So like, you've got to understand as a conscious person, like this awake person who's realized the truth, now that you've got to be careful with your words, is not to be completely honest with your words. It's to be correct with your words. To never say the least damaging thing, but always say what means the most to you. You know? It still sounds very weird. I'm sure of it. Thinking, what do you mean? So, if you get annoyed or angry, just understand that those are temporary emotions, and any thoughts or words from your anger should always be put off to the side and neglected, pent up, or stored away, just as we think to, really. But sometimes when it comes to a third party, we never really think to store our words of anger. So I'm just going to directly tell you there, we need to store those. Alright, got a pretty tight line there. Ooh. And then another one. There we go. Yeah, other things as well is like, you need to realize that when you speak, accidentally, feelings and thoughts and emotions can really leak out of your speech mannerisms and the way you hold yourself, really out of anything there. So you've got to realize when you fear things and that like forces you to say the thing you don't want to say. And the things you don't want to say doesn't exactly mean to be the worst thing you could say. It's just something that you don't want to say usually comes from a response of fear, because fear brings that weird control into our lives where it needs to be in a state where we're comfortable in. So when you fear something and you get you have an opportunity to respond back, that's where fear controls you, and it says, "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to say that," or you pick a choice that will forever haunt you, basically. So to be careful with your words is just to be very precise with them. Take your time with them, but when I say take your time, it's like at first you'll realize that you've got this little problem with the way you talk, that it kind of just leaks out and spirals out, or when you try to talk correctly, you're saying and dumb and da. But then over time, you learn, oh, all it takes is just a brief knowledge on what I'm talking about to be able to just spew some words out. And if I just go a little bit slower, my brain can piece together every single word that I'm going to say anyway. So I don't need to rush and say, oh, got that one finished. Ooh, got that one finished there. Lovely. So, obviously the next point I said about is the actions that you take in the world also have a great effect, and those are the only thing, one of the only things you have control in, the actions that you do and take. So basically every second in this universe ticks by whether we command it to or not. That is a constant within our universe. Time always passes, and whatever speed it passes, it always will pass. A second will come in a second, and a year will come in a year. And the things you do in that time really dictate where your life ends out, right? We quite literally walk on a thin bed of ice, and a lot of us just get through life with sheer luck alone, just sheer uncomprehensible luck. We don't know what we're doing, we don't really care for what we're doing, but still we manage to make it to 50 and chill out, like. But that's not the point. The point isn't to just get there and chill out and be a zombie, because people who get there are really lucky if they haven't worked hard for it. This pen's shit. I'm not, don't worry. So, me saying people get there by sheer luck obviously is a bit of a judgment for me to make. But in fact, it is true. Because obviously, the majority of us, or well, most people in the world, which is 9 billion of us, we have one thing: camaraderie. We always have each other by our sides to help each other out along the way. And obviously every single human that's on this planet has learnt a different thing through the experiences in their life. When people have a bigger social circle, they will interact with each other more and see through more of their suffering that they have in their life. Think about it like this. You're having a relationship struggle that if no one was to tell you something, you would probably end up breaking up with that person. But just because you have a single conversation with someone, maybe some old fart at a bus station, let's say, this random man makes you now think that maybe I shouldn't break up with my partner, and you don't. I've lost my track a bit there, so what I'm saying is that through the action of that person, obviously they've helped you, but without that person to help you, you wouldn't have taken action on it yourself. You wouldn't have done anything, and you may have just been lucky to make that through because of that old person at the bus station helping you. And obviously in a world where we all used to be a lot more social, things like that would happen a lot more often. Just random help, a stranger's words or friends or family's words would just help us out of a situation. But now we're more lonelier than ever. So what do we do with that information? Well, yeah, it's hard, because if we're lonelier than ever, we can't just count on a stranger's words. I mean, strangers don't even talk to you nowadays, let alone look at you. They don't peek their face over to you, so how are they ever going to talk to you? Well, I say this. You talk to yourself. And I mean this in mindfulness. Always just being mindful of the things that you're doing, the way that you're feeling, the way that you're talking, and the person that you're being, really. And just constantly seeing if it's an account for what you really desire to be. Everyone knows who they wanted to be when they grew up, and still, I hope you should know who you want to be. But by really actually knowing who you want to be, and then looking at yourself, either in a mirror or quite literally just respectively reflecting on your own actions, you get to really model through your life and say, right, well, I'm not really proud of my binge eating at 11 p.m. every single night, so I'm going to cut that out. And then you start working on your habits, and that binge eating turns into healthy eating. And then from there, you start going to the gym and everything, really. And all your actions end up causing a total life-changing shift where you're now successful because you've just cleaned up your eating. But because you checked yourself, checked your emotions, you could see a flaw in your identity and fix it. I say being mindful is the greatest quality someone could have, because, like I said, about a stranger's word, obviously, like I said about a stranger's word, they will help you through weird, strange situations, yeah, but that only comes about if you talk about it. We all have our private things that we're basically embarrassed to really bring into the light, our shadow, I guess we could say, yeah. And now this shadow doesn't pop up with our persona. This shadow is always pretty much when we're private. So to be mindful, you get to see that private side of you and sort him out. But a stranger's never going to see that private side of you and say, you know, you should probably stop doing that. You're the only person to see that. So in a way, it's kind of like a therapy where you sit down with that therapist yourself, tell him your deepest, darkest truths. And it says, well, just maybe we can work on that. So you help yourself. You really do help yourself. And I think that's a beautiful thing to do, to have, a quality to have. But yeah, going back again. So our actions are very important. Why? Because like I said, that one habit change of eating drove this person to success. And that's just not some wishy-washy example. That happens so many times. It's called a keystone habit, right? You've all got actions. Every action that we do either takes away or gives to us. And now think of like the energy or the power that you have day by day as water. And now you are a vessel, you're a vase, but I'm just going to call it a vessel. And now your power obviously gets put in from somewhere. So we're just going to imagine the vase being filled up with water, your power. And now every single habit that you have, every single action that you take throughout a day creates a hole in this vase, in your vessel. And now the habits that give back to you, so like brushing your teeth, going to the gym, doing good eating, doing your washing, things like that, just basically stuff that is good for you objectively. Those water spouts from those holes, they basically just go up and fly right back into the vessel. Okay, but all your habits that don't help you, the water now spurring out of those holes just hits the ground and is wasted. Do you understand what I'm saying here? So your goal is to basically clean up all your habits and all the little things that you do to give power back to you, to enable you to be more active in your day and in everything that you do, causing you a much greater amount of success because you've fixed all these little 1% habits, and now you're on your way to have even more power. And with that even more power, you're able to exert more power in a better direction. Do you get what I'm saying? There's a whole lot more I can say about habits, right? But I'll just leave it at that because I hope that it wasn't too much for you, but there's a lot to intake there. But the main fact of this video being is that you only have control over the words and actions that you do. So if there's always one thing to be mindful of, it's those two. You can't control your thoughts, you can't control your emotions, you can't control situations, just your words and your actions. If you've liked this video, feel free to drop me a subscribe and a like. I'd absolutely appreciate that. But for other words, I'm done here. I've said enough, I've said my piece, and I'm going to post this video now. Peace out.